We'll see if my voice makes it through the meetings.
Bumper cars.
Welcome to the July 28th, 2014 Washougal City Council Workshop Meeting. I'll call the meeting to order. Rose, could you do the roll, please?
Councilmember Boger.
Here.
Councilmember Lindsay.
Here.
Councilmember Greenlee.
Here.
Councilmember Shoemaker.
Here.
Councilmember Wagner.
Here.
Councilmember Freeman.
Here.
Thank you. Councilmember McDaniel let us know that she would not be at either one of the meetings this evening. We do have two opportunities in the agenda for individuals from the public that, if you have any comments that you would like to make towards council. Yes. If you would, come on up to the microphone and give us your name and address. Good evening.
I made copies of my testimony,
Sure.
and the backside is recycled, and it got copied too, and I didn't mean it to, but I'll pass that around.
Nothing confidential or national
Nothing-
security or anything?
I couldn't spot anything.
Okay.
I'm Don Steinke. I live north of Camas, about 3-4 miles. My address is my address is 4833 Northeast 238 Avenue, but I don't get mail there. The people run over my post office box too often, so I go to the post office. Last November, I began to ask the question, how could the governor approve of an oil terminal in Vancouver if the City Council of Vancouver asked him not to? I wasn't the only one asking this, because a few months later, the City of Seattle passed a resolution asking state agencies to postpone building permits for new oil terminals until the safety issues were resolved. Washougal gets twice as many oil trains as Seattle. Then on June 2, the Vancouver City Council asked the governor and all state agencies to deny permits for all oil terminals, period. They didn't say until they're safe, they just said for the foreseeable future. When the governor makes a final decision, it would help if he could point to more cities such as Washougal expressing similar concerns. In late June, the Washington State Council of Firefighters passed a resolution asking the governor to halt existing oil train traffic until his safety study is completed. On July 17, the Columbia Gorge Commission asked both states to use the authorities granted by the Gorge Protection Act to protect the economy of the gorge from the potentially devastating impacts of coal and oil transport by issuing a moratorium on all new fossil fuel transport through the gorge until both states and all gorge communities have jointly completed a risk assessment and implemented a plan to reduce the risks. On July 22, the city of South Portland, Maine, did Vancouver one better. They passed an ordinance, not a resolution, banning the transfer of crude oil from rail to marine vessel. Albany, New York, Berkeley, California, Richmond, and Oakland, California have also passed resolutions opposing new oil train traffic. According to the Federal Railroad Administration, BNSF averages 60 derailments per week. In most cases, there is no loss of product, but all it takes is one. The province of Quebec is suing the railroad for $459 million for the oil train fire there 1 year ago. On July 23, the United States Department, that was 5-6 days ago, the United States Department of Transportation issued a notice of proposed rulemaking for next generation tank car standards and are seeking public comment. And I'd encourage you to submit comment to them. And I would suggest that you ask DOT that the new tank car standards would include 9/16" steel tanks, electronically controlled pneumatic brakes, and rollover protection. They're calling this option 1. While they phase out the existing fleet, ask for a speed limit of 30 miles per hour for high-hazard flammable trains that lack enhanced braking systems. And this I just added an hour ago. Ask that there be no expansion of oil train traffic until the existing fleet is replaced. That's not one of their options on DOT, but I think we could ask. And ask for a speed limit of 40 miles per hour for the high-hazarded flammable trains, which include tank cars not meeting the new tank car standards, which will be going 50 miles an hour. And there are the docket numbers. When you pass your resolution, I hope you'll send a copy to the city council members in the city of Hoquiam, because the 3 terminals planned there are designed to be small enough to avoid state control. Combined, those 3 terminals would add approximately 19 oil trains per week to the total. Ask the city of Hoquiam to not issue any permits for oil terminals until the existing tank car fleet has been replaced by the next generation tank cars. Thank you.
Thank you, Don.
Mr. Mayor, I was going to actually bring this topic up under council comments. Should I wait till then and or should I say what I was going to say now?
Totally up to you.
Well, I think we ought
I
to,
believe there's another speaker on oil.
well, okay, let's let the other speaker on oil talk. Then I'll make my comment.
Oh, looks like there's 2 more.
Who would like to go next? Hi, Larry.
Do I need to fill in everything, or you got it on here? On this sheet that says name and address and email and phone?
I think we've got it.
Okay.
Thanks, Don.
Good evening, Council. I'm Larry Keister, resident of rural Washougal, 4402 Southeast Setzelberger Road. I'm asking you to protect the outstanding scenic, natural, and cultural and recreational resources of Washougal and protect the health, safety, and the economy of our town of Washougal from impacts of increased rail transportation. Washougal has one above-grade crossing or overpass. Although Washougal has a downtown area, I am referring to the business section of Washougal as being E Street. That is where we have gas stations, convenience stores, service centers, retail outlets, and the beginning of our residential district. Residents and tourists using Highway 14 are not going to cross the railroad tracks knowing they could be delayed departing E Street. There are plans to add commercial establishments on the south side of Highway 14, east of Wesley Ford. This will give travelers the option to shop or dine without going over the rail lines. This will have an impact on the Washougal Business District. Our police and fire departments are located on the south side of the tracks. Business and residential are on the north side, impeding emergency response time. Businesses will not want to locate in Washougal knowing that police and fire might not be able to respond to emergencies. Washougal has industrial property on 32nd Street. To get from the industrial park to Highway 14, you'd have to use the intersection at 32nd and Evergreen, already an intersection congested by frequent train movement. This is going to have a negative impact on getting industry to locate on that property. The resolution by the Washougal City Council in March of 2012 requested that Washougal be a party of record to the environmental impact statement and the scope of the impacts that would affect Washougal by increased rail traffic. I have seen very little, if any, cooperation from the Burlington Northern Railroad. Washougal has to demand that our economy and safety not be impacted by increased rail traffic. Ask for an additional overpass. Demand that we have proper fire apparatus, manpower, and training of personnel to properly respond to catastrophic rail incidences. A portion of rural Washougal lies within the Columbia River Scenic Area. On July 8th, the Gorge Commission passed a resolution against coal and oil trains and sent a strong letter to both Governors Inslee and Kitzhaber for a moratorium on all new fossil fuel transport through both states. You must join the Gorge Commission and take a strong stand to protect the health, safety, and economy of Washougal. You must take a strong stand to protect, please include this important issue on one of your next agenda items. Thank you.
Thanks, Larry. Anyone else? Okay, Brett.
I think this is something we need to look at, but I don't want to go too far afield on it. I think what we look at ought to focus strictly on issues that impact Washougal. I'm not really interested in getting into the climate change issue, or anything that really doesn't have a, parochial impact on Washougal. And those two issues that I see are basically rail traffic and safety. I got this document online. It talks about the number of oil incidents that have happened over the last 5 years. And we could be sitting here at a council meeting and have an incident out here, and we could very well be in serious trouble if it happens. So it has a much greater impact on us than I think in Vancouver. And so this is something I'd like to see a workshop on very soon and take a position on it, because Governor Inslee is going to pay attention, I think, to what we do.
Dave, do you want to bring council up to speed on where we're at in regards to the workshop? Okay, Mitch.
Well, I think the first to mention is that, yes, we are working on bringing this forward back to you at a work session to discuss. I think it's also worth mentioning that we have, in all the instances, commented we're parties of record on all of them. We have commented on the scoping. We've raised the issues related to traffic, having at-grade crossings, and the effect that could have on not only our economy, but also on our safety with getting police and fire. So we're working on those issues. We will bring that back, and then really we'll get direction from council whether or not we want to move forward with a resolution or some other specific action to take.
Well, there's some actions like we could actually intervene.
Yes, and we're not past that point.
Yeah.
We are not. Thank you for bringing that up. We are not past that point. Notice of adjudicative hearing will come out, and once that does, we're a party of record. We will be notified of that, and if we want to take action at that time, we can become an intervener at that time.
When do you anticipate bringing this back for workshop?
Probably the next one.
We're just trying to work the timing on it
Yeah.
right now.
I don't know exactly.
We will have time. We will have time once the notice comes out and we need to be, we just need to be thinking about, do we want to become an intervener in that process? And that's really the
Well, I'm not sure that's necessary myself, but I think maybe some kind of strongly worded resolution of some kind to the governor, at least take care of, at least mitigate these impacts on us, like at-grade crossings and traffic, and providing us with some safety equipment, perhaps. I mean, these are all legitimate issues.
Yes.
And they aren't getting into the climate change impacts, which I won't go there.
Yeah, we didn't raise any of those issues, although we did raise a little bit about idling cars and that, but the environmental, I've yet to see an EIS yet that addresses or has attempted to address those issues that we have raised.
Okay,
So, due back to you soon.
that's fine.
Okay, moving to new business. Melissa, welcome. Come on up. Regional Transportation Council update. Oh, you can sit up here, be comfortable. Thank you for being here tonight.
Well, thanks for inviting me. There's not a lot going on right now because there's no transportation dollars. So for any capital projects, there just isn't anything going on. So right now is a good time for staff to be working on updating the congestion management process. They're gathering the initial data for that. Every 4 years, we have to have a fully updated plan per the federal government and the regional transportation plan. And the 2035 regional transportation plan we're in the process of updating and working on the demographic trends of that. And if you have the chance or the time to go online, the videos do a much better job than I do of showing it, because we get a lot of videos of little cars going and moving. They do real-time traffic reporting and things like that, showing where the congested areas are, like 205, Padden Parkway, is that how you say the name? That's a bad spot, and we're talking about how we can put in some maybe traffic stoplights, to slow the traffic on and off.
On-ramps.
On-ramps, thank you. The names for those in a couple of high accident-prone areas, or areas that, coming off of 205 at rush hour on top of 14. That's another area that gets really congested. Maybe we can look at off-ramps there in that area. So they're just working on updating all the plans, getting everything together. Next month, August meeting, August 4th, I kind of got a glimpse of the agenda. It hasn't been published yet, but BRT is going to be one of the issues on that. I'm not exactly sure what the subject will be yet regarding that. If maybe it's just the implementation part, how they're going to get started with that since it passed C-Tran. Not much else. I haven't met Michelle Wagner yet. Hi.
Hi, how are
Nice
you
to
doing,
meet you.
Melissa? Nice to
Welcome.
meet you.
Sorry. Do you have any questions? I know Mr. Greenlee has done a wonderful job for me the first quarter. I was kind of out of it on that part. So, yes, ma'am.
What are the projections out here on this East County for us of transportation, of congestion and anticipation?
Well, the biggest thing was the upgrade of the freeway, Highway 14. Getting the highway rebuilt and getting the roundabouts put down under that. That's it for right now, because we've got Skamania, Clark County, North, Klickitat, all the regions. So right now, there's not much else. They're finishing up the Salmon Creek area with the new bridge there and the roundabouts and things like that.
What street is that on?
That is, pardon?
Sorry.
134th.
Yeah.
Oh, I was just there and I didn't see anything. Well, I went to the east and it's probably to the west.
Yeah, when you got, they're doing a lot of stuff, finishing up there.
I should have gone cruising.
Yeah. Because it changes all the time. My niece, and it's like, okay, which way do I go to my niece's house this time? So there's nothing really projected right now. It depends on what your staff, if they have anything. Every city funnels their stuff to us. So I haven't seen anything lately for Washougal.
Well,
If I could just add to that, a couple of new things. I don't know if you track the Portland television and newspaper, but ODOT is putting up lighted signs that have estimated trip durations, much like the ones they have up north in the Seattle area. Washington and this region will be participating in that. Those signs will go up over the next few years. I wouldn't expect them next week.
No.
But over the next few years, we will have signs that, for example, let you make an intelligent choice up north at the fairgrounds, whether you're going to go 205 or I-5 through Portland to get south. And similarly, there will be some choices to make about some of the east-west connectors that we have. The other thing to say about funding, to give you a sense of how dire it is, this SR 14 project costs $54 million, more or less. The total amount of money available to WSDOT in this region for next year is only slightly more than 1/3 of that amount.
It's like 30.
They will not even have the funds available to do grind inlays like we do all over our city. They will be doing strictly patching and emergency repairs. The level of funding for transportation I don't think anybody has, unless you're right in it, you don't have any idea how dire it is.
It's at an all-time low. That's why all the legislators, we've been, asking everybody that at a higher level is to get us some money for the Southwest region, because it isn't there. So, any
Other questions?
did
for
I answer
Melissa?
your questions?
Thank you.
Next month should be interesting. I'll report back if it's been a good one. But seriously, there's good presentations and a lot of videos. We get a lot of videos at our meetings, so it's kind of hard to translate some of that.
What website is that?
It is www.rtc.gov or .org, but it's RTC of Vancouver.
Thank you.
CVTV also,
CVTV, yeah, covers it.
and the meetings are the first Tuesday of every month.
August 4th is our next one, 4 o'clock. So, all right, thank you.
Thanks, Melissa.
Thanks, Melissa.
Mitch, some recreational marijuana code changes.
Thank you, Your Honor. And to not put too fine a point on it, more specifically, these amendments are intended to address are both medical marijuana,
Don't panic, Joyce.
collective gardens, and recreational marijuana producers, processors, and retailers. City Council, your direction to me was to go back and look at drawing up provisions that would prohibit or otherwise ban marijuana use within the city. We did that. We looked at, if you recall, we initially looked at very simply putting language in that would prohibit any use that violated federal law. The exact language was this was proposed language that we were looking at, so no use that is illegal under local, state, or federal law shall be allowed in any zone within the city. We felt that moving forward that would be sufficient enough to ban the use effectively within the city, and that would be an easy one to do. However, the city of Wenatchee and the ACLU issue came up. We were made aware of a case that the ACLU was looking at going after the city of Wenatchee. Wenatchee was looking at very similar to us, basically relying on marijuana being a controlled a drug under the Controlled Substance Act and banning it based on its not complying with federal law. The ACLU was going to step in at that point and say that they felt that federal law didn't trump state law, and they were going to sue. Wenatchee smartly said, put on the brakes. They put a moratorium in place, but said that they were going to rely on their general police power to protect the public health and safety of the city, as well as relying on the Attorney General, State Attorney General's opinion that cities could regulate and effectively ban the use. So, not wanting to be the next target of the ACLU, we switched up our approach on putting forward that ban. And what we came up with is this language that this will show up in all zoning designations within the city. Medical marijuana collective gardens, as defined in RCW 69.51A 085, are prohibited, and recreational marijuana producers, processors, and retailers, as defined in RCW 6950-101, are prohibited. And then with the footnote regarding the sunset provision that council wanted. Another look at it within the use table. This is a commercial use table. It lists them out. The X means they are prohibited. This is remarkably similar to every other zoning designation that we have, residential and industrial, so that the same language will be similarly expressed within each designation. Getting to the Planning Commission recommendation, they recommended that that language be forwarded to you, effectively banning the use within all the zoning designations. The sunset clause, though, they wanted to have it 2 years instead of the 1 year that we had discussed earlier. Their thinking on that was they felt that it'd be too much to do after the close of the long session, and they thought moving it out for another year would be fine. It'd give them more time, and they noted the fact that if we did something different in the interim, then we could close that sunset loop at that time. So that is their recommendation to you in order to for the sunset provision within the code. So for this evening, the recommended action is the approval of the consent agenda to set a public hearing to take public testimony for August 11th, 2014 at 7 on the proposed amendments to prohibit medical marijuana collective gardens and recreational marijuana producers, processors, and retailers.
Questions, comments? Brent?
Just a technical comment. The footnotes to these use tables. It says this section shall be in effect until additional regulations are established or September 1st, 2016, whichever comes first. I think until additional regulations are established is a little bit vague.
Regulations by whom?
Yeah.
What?
You said regulations by whom? I think you just may as well just set a date. And if additional regulations come out, we can deal with that at the time.
That's true, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's all I'm going to say for right now. The time frame to put an advisory measure on the ballot is, if we're going to do it, we got to do it tonight or have a special meeting.
If you want to do it at your regular meeting, tonight is the last regular meeting before the cutoff, which is Tuesday, August 5th.
Okay, I'm still supportive of that.
Other comments, questions, Dave?
One of my colleagues pointed out to me today that if we have a 2-year horizon on this, then we're leaving it to another council. I don't like that idea because I think the new council will be unfamiliar with it. I think this council has dealt with it. I think this is cleanup business that this council needs to take care of. I don't want to leave this to another council. I think we should do our job. And so I would recommend a year and a half instead of 2 years. That satisfies the Planning Commission basic concern of needing more than a year. And it's 6 months under their farthest horizon of 2 years. I think they would probably accept that.
You're still in the same calendar year. You'd be moving from September to March.
No, it'd be, well, December 31st, 2015. You talking about then? That would be this council is in office unless we have a vacancy.
Yes.
To December 31st, 2015.
Actually, the math works out that 18 months is too long. If this goes into effect September 1st, September is 1 year, well, August, and then September, October, November,
That's
December.
16 months.
So 18.
How about 31 December,
That's what I would.
2015?
We don't agree with much on this issue, but Dave, but we agree on that.
Personally, I'd like to not have a sunset. What's the complications with that?
There's no complications. The direction that staff received was to develop the regulations to ban, and then there was this idea that there should be a sunset clause because of the possible legislative work done at the state. And so following that direction from council, staff made those recommendations to the Planning Commission, and Planning Commission agreed that there should be a sunset clause, but again, felt it should be 2 years. I'm bringing forward the recommendations.
Sure.
Staff developed those regulations based on direction from this council. If you choose to modify it, that is up to you.
I have one question. Why on number 4 is the Woodburn Hill a sub-area development? Why wouldn't that just fall into residential district or commercial district or?
The Woodburn Hills sub-area actually contains other very specific uses within that district
Okay.
that can occur up there that may not in just a regular residential district. I felt it prudent that we address every zoning designation within the city. Anytime we listed a use is when I put these uses in there.
And then the second question was, when is the new state law, the date of the new, or in regards to some decisions, was there a date associated with that, a specific date, or?
No,
Okay.
we anticipate that the state legislature will bring this issue up again in their next session and
Okay.
address it in some form.
Okay.
And that form, we don't know what that will be.
They may or may not do anything with it at all.
Yeah.
They attempted last year and nothing passed, so.
Yes, it may.
The one thing making it easier is the legislature cannot change the text of an initiative for 2 years. So unless it's a 2/3 vote in the legislature, and until this session ended this year, it would have taken 2/3 to change the initiative. When they meet next year, they can do it by majority, so it's more likely something will make it through.
That's a very good point.
Can we make it 31 December 2015?
We're not taking any action tonight. We'll set a public hearing tonight so that you can hear it on August 11th. At that date, you can get
Can we
anything in there. or
formally
nothing.
direct staff to bring it back to us with 2015, or do you have to amend it on the floor?
I think we would prefer to have it come back as it is now with the recommendation of the Planning Commission intact, and then have you make changes if you care to do it at that time.
Okay.
These changes seem pretty straightforward, pretty easy to do.
Well, I also would recommend that technical change that I.
Yes.
I think that's a good thought,
Yeah.
too. I mean, it's a little big, right?
And I'm sensitive to the issue of overruling the planning commission because I'm on the council, because as a member of the planning commission, I got overruled so often. So I'm sensitive to that issue.
Yeah, just as a process, I'd just assume if you're gonna make a change on them, that you make it in formal action itself rather than just in a workshop setting or that type of stuff, so.
Works for me.
On that date, you can certainly do that without any problem at all, or no sunset date.
I will update my agenda, Bill, for the hearing based on this conversation. I'll have language based on that per your discussion, this is what you.
I would suggest you have an alternative version of the
Yep.
resolution.
Thank you for the procedural advice.
Ordinance.
Or, excuse me, ordinance.
Other questions or comments for Mitch? Thanks, Mitch. David, EMS levy lid lift.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. We have a presentation that I'm calling a budget discussion or a budget update. One of the primary topics is to talk about our levy lid lifts. But the order that I had anticipated, okay, why did it do that?
Is that here in our box or no?
It should be in the Dropbox, yes.
Okay.
Somehow, it lost the device. Should I take it out and plug it in again?
Yeah.
How about if I try mine?
There it is.
Yay. All right. So, budget discussion, and the order of our conversation will be to give an update, just to make sure we're grounded again together on the status of our general fund and what we're trying to accomplish in 2015. That leads us into more detailed conversation about levy lid lifts and you'll note that it's now plural, levy lid lifts, based on some input from the council within the last week or so, leads us into some more detailed conversation about license fees and the transportation benefit district that we've been chatting about, and then a summary, and then also I was updated late last week that the council had some questions coming out of your last budget committee meeting, so I very much appreciate getting a heads up on that, and so I'll proactively respond to those questions, and then if there are other questions, certainly we'll review those. So the assumptions that we've all been tracking on for the 2015 budget are, in response to council informal direction at previous workshops, we want to fund $360,000 in street maintenance funds per year. That is an increase of $210,000 over previous years, and so all of these assumptions assume an additional $210,000 into streets. So we are meeting the council's direction with all of these assumptions. Of course, we have a continued focus on cost containment to address our deficit. And just as a sidebar and a reminder, we are looking at a technique with our travel and training and professional services to see if we can recover any savings there. There are no guarantees that we will, and that will be ongoing here over the next period of time. We are also assuming, for the sake of our estimates in this discussion, that the council will take the 1% increase that you have as councilmanic authority in the base levy, and that is roughly equivalent to $36,000 of revenue over what we are receiving in 2014. So those are the preliminary assumptions. And just as a reminder, I'm not as good at this as Mitch is, so I don't know how to make a little red dot appear on there. I'm not going to try. But if you look at 2015, down toward the bottom, the estimate for 2015, you see a number of $570,000, basically $569,000. At the beginning of this year, at the end of last year, that was our projected deficit for 2015, basically $570,000. We have updated that, and the news is good. The economy is improving, and our expenditure and revenue, preliminary expenditure and revenue estimates indicate, and based on all of the assumptions that I just described, including that additional $210,000 for streets, so the news is good, that projected deficit is now $322,000 instead of $570,000. Now remember, 210 of that 322 is that enhancement to street funding. In the absence of that, we would be closer to 120,000 or 130,000. So we are therefore trying to address a deficit of $322,000, and that is our common goal here. So the mayor's proposal, as you know, for addressing that has expense side and revenue side options. Specifically on the expense side, and there'll be more detail on the next slide, is continued administrative efficiencies. And then on the revenue side, a renewal of the previously existing levy lid lift for fire and emergency medical services, and the new imposition of a license tab fee under the formation of a transportation benefit district. Specifically, on the expense side, and as a note, we have already implemented this, so we will see some savings in 2014 as a result of this, but for the projected budget in 2015, approximately $73,000 in administrative savings, and that is through the reduction of one employee at City Hall. It was a vacant, there were 2 vacant positions, so we're not going to fill one of them. And then to ensure that we can continue to accomplish the work at City Hall, there's a little bit of reorganization and cross-training in finance and community development to accomplish the tasks. So we're right in the process of implementing that. We have realized that savings, 73 toward the 322. On the revenue side, the renewal of the fire and emergency medical services levy lid lift, if approved by voters this fall, would bring in approximately $144,000. And if we imposed, pursuant to the mayor's recommendation, a new $10 license fee, That brings in approximately, actually a little more than 105, but I used 105 so that this math equals out perfectly, and you have a balanced budget of $322,000. So that is the high-level working draft proposal, if you would, for the mayor's budget in terms of the strategy for the general fund. This is all general and street fund. In conversations with the council, we've been asked what would happen if there wasn't a license tab fee of any amount in 2015. And we have identified an item operationally in our budget that would bring approximately $100,000 of operational savings on an ongoing basis every year. And to replace that 105 for the license tab fee, we'd have to find another $5,000 somewhere in the budget. But the result would be a balanced budget. Now, I know that there was a question on some of the real mechanics and details of that and the origin of that fund and the like. And if that's okay, I will answer that at the end of the presentation when I go through all the questions that the council had. I will just say here, and I'll explain it later, that this is a real ongoing operational savings. It doesn't get into reserves or anything like that. And I'll explain that in further detail. So there is an alternative that's out there, and that was requested by the council. The mayor's proposal still continues to look at the $105,000 or so from a transportation benefit district $10 tab fee.
Can I ask a question here? If you do the 100,000 slowdown, that's a one-time item, because you can't keep doing that every year, I assume.
No, that would be an ongoing operational savings.
Would be.
Yes.
Well, okay, that would be ongoing, okay.
Right.
There was some confusion about that issue, so if you want to finish your presentation, then we bring it back, because we discussed it and there was
I can talk about it now. Maybe it's best. I was thinking I'd do all the questions that the council had at the end, but since this is topical, I can address that question now, since we're right on that part of it. That's fine. So going back to that, as you recall, we created the Vehicle Equipment Repair and Replacement Fund. We call it ER&R, the Vehicle ER&R Fund, several years ago, and we seeded that fund with several $100,000 of general fund unrestricted reserves. We needed to seed the fund because we had some expenditures that we had to make right out of the gate. And then what we did is we developed a vehicle ER&R schedule where we scheduled all of our rolling stock for replacement according to industry best practice standards for vehicle depreciation and equipment. So we're talking about everything from a Ford Taurus sedan that the office staff drives around to 10-yard dump trucks and backhoes, all and everything in between. We've got a best practices depreciation schedule for that. As you can imagine, and then we, based upon that depreciation schedule and the original seed money, came up with how much we need to put into that fund operationally every year to keep it solvent and for us to be able to replace the equipment.
What was that figure?
That number is in the $200,000 to $300,000 range per year. Now, we've made quite a number of expenditures over the last several years because we had some really deferred needs in terms of vehicle replacement, and I'm sure you and members of the community have seen some of our new equipment rolling in town and doing good work. As you can imagine, in any plan like that, you're using averages and best practices, and so you say a sedan is good for this many miles or this many years, or a dump truck is good for this. And our real experience could differ, and there's nothing to say that we couldn't adjust some of those replacement schedules a little bit and try to stretch the useful life of our vehicles just a little bit longer. And so very preliminarily, Jennifer Forsberg has done some computations to show that with very modest changes to the depreciation schedule for our rolling stock, we would remain solvent in that fund and be able to replace our equipment with a reduction on an ongoing annual basis of $100,000 every year. Now, we need to do some corroboration of that back with our line department heads, just to be sure, show the details, double check, and all of that. But we believe a pretty tight preliminary estimate is that we can enjoy savings of about $100,000. Now, I don't want to say that's not without some risk, because we did identify, based off of some best practices, a certain number of years or certain number of miles, and we're going to push the envelope just a little bit. But it's kind of like when you look at our computer ER&R plan, we're saying 4 years for desktops and laptops, they should be replaced. Well, maybe sometimes we can get 5 years or 6 years. Other times, maybe we only get 3 years. So that's the basis for that. We wouldn't propose something if we didn't think prudently we would be able to keep adequate rolling stock in the community and deliver services. We would like to stay completely and precisely in tune with some of these industry standard best practices, but I think with some modest risk in that regard, we could deliver this sort of savings, and it doesn't affect any service delivery. It doesn't cut back on things that we do. We just stretch our rigs a little bit longer. So it is ongoing, and I think that was part of the question.
It's a savings.
It is a savings, an ongoing operational savings, so it accrues to the deficit on an ongoing basis. We do need to just corroborate it just a little bit, just to be sure. There's no implication about where did the funds come from, because we have not quite, but almost fully expended the initial seed money. And now we're operating off of the annual payments to the fund.
And that's not going to change just because we saved 100,000. We're going to continue.
We will continue to do that. That's right. You will continue to see ongoing payments into that fund. Yes, we will continue to make that transfer into the fund. So hopefully that provides clarification for what that would do. Again, that is not our first go-to. The mayor, as you know, is looking at the legislature's provision for you, councilmanically, to have and to enact a dedicated revenue source for street maintenance, very specifically through a transportation benefit district. It is a new revenue source for us, and as opposed to doing this, is proposing that step in at 10 cents per license.
$10 per
Or,
I was going to say 10 cents wouldn't.
10 cents, yeah, that's the levy lid lift.
I
Everything
like
is
that.
everything is a 10.
A dime.
It's a dime.
$10.
Sawbuck.
Dave, you've indicated that you want to put $360,000 a year into streets. What's the minimum amount of street maintenance money that's required to maintain the streets at the current level? Which is what, 87?
80. We're at an 80. We're actually at a 79. 360,000. If I recall, we get to a 78 over 5 years, and we're comfortable within the level of exactness that that index really means, that is reasonable. For us to get it to an 85, which is what, 82, or whatever that number is in the low to mid 80s, that industry tells us is the ideal scenario for a community. These are weighted averages. Some streets will be higher, some are lower, some much lower. That we would need 500,000 a year to do that. So anything between 360 and 500 might help us to trend up just a little bit.
Okay.
And these are estimates. We could certainly use more. We could use up to 500. But we believe we can reasonably and prudently recommend 360 to you for now. And we'll keep an eye on real estate excise tax, because that can be enhanced, and as there's more transactions at higher values, and potentially we can do something with that. Although I would submit we might want to do some other things with those funds, because we have other capital facilities needs as well. So that's where we were as to until a recent budget committee meeting, which was a week ago from this past Friday, at which time the council requested that at this workshop and then at the meeting that we prepare for your consideration an additional levy lid lift for our community to consider. And specifically, it would be for enhanced public safety services in the community, and most prominently in that, an additional police officer to the force. The identified amount of the lift is exactly the same as the fire and EMS lift, 10 cents per $1,000 of assessed value, so that's the same rate as fire and EMS. If you combine the two, it would be 20 cents. As with the fire and EMS levy lid lift, it would raise $144,000 in additional general fund revenue, but it would be, and that would be for added services. $100,000 is roughly the cost on an ongoing annual basis for a police officer. And then there'd be roughly $44,000 for other public safety enhancements. Nothing specifically identified now. The resolution before you this evening does not precisely identify that. It makes some references in the recitals, but...
Is that for the police officer, for his?
No, it would be a fully, we always use the word fully loaded in the budget, and there's no specific meaning for that in the terms of police officers, but a fully loaded police officer, trained, outfitted, $100,000 a year.
Okay.
10 cents raises 144, so that brings additional $44,000.
Oh, I'm tracking now.
The stated purpose from the council was that this was all to enhance public safety services, new services. And so we would identify as part of the budget process, if this were to pass or in anticipation of it passing, enhancements, and I could list for you a number of different things, but in our survey, our community had some concerns about code enforcement. We know that there's new technology coming online that is going to enhance our coordination and cooperation with agencies across the Portland metropolitan area. Right now, out of the good graces of the Sheriff's Office, where that's covered for us for a little while, but we're going to have to pay for that ourselves. It's an enhancement to services. This would be a wholly appropriate source to fund that as we move forward. Communication was a big issue for our community in the recent survey, and certainly enhanced communication around what we're doing in public safety could be funded out of this. That's just quickly off the top of my head kind of some of the areas, but we would have to have more concerted conversation about that. So I thought it was important to note here to make sure that I was understanding the direction of the council, and this is certainly for your conversation at the end of my presentation. This particular levy lid lift is not part of the deficit reduction strategy. This is for enhancements to service. The other levy lid lift for fire and emergency medical services is part of the deficit reduction strategy to maintain existing levels of service, distinct purposes. These would be two separate items on the ballot, and I'll get into that in a little more detail. Very briefly, you've seen this before, but to get into the levy lid lifts, they're allowed by statute. We have a cap of $3.10 per $1,000 of assessed value. We can use them for any purpose. It does not have to be listed. However, it's been practice, and I think it's good practice, to list the title, or excuse me, to list the purpose. If you do, you must track the funds separately. I think that's really good accountability to our voters. It can be for any amount of time, including permanent. We've kind of looked at that 6-year time frame as something that we've been comfortable with, and so all of these consider that 6-year time frame. Our estimated AV, assessed valuation as a community, this year we're at about $1.29 billion of assessed valuation. Our preliminary estimates is that that will increase about 12% to $1.45 billion. And depending, the very latest, just this last week, estimate from our friends at the assessor's office is that will yield a rate of $2.67 per thousand. That's without any lid lifts. That includes the 1% increase. So you can see if we're capped at $3.10 and we'll be at $2.67, there's room for 43 cents in a lid lift. That doesn't mean you go do 43 cents, but that's the capacity that we would have. That is, this is a very different conversation than we've had in the past years, where we were capped at our rate of 310. You had no opportunity to lift. And in fact, even without a lift, if there wasn't a cap, you know, we were 320, or, you know, our rate would have been higher, but we couldn't do it. So we were losing money year over year. The economy has picked up in terms of the real estate market, and that's why we're able to have these options. A little bit of history, again, you're aware of all of this, but in '06, our voters approved a 6-year 10-cent lid lift. The approval rate was about 56%. That gives you the turnout numbers there. It was for 6 years. It ended in 2012. Our recent survey that we just got shows that 71% of the respondents to the survey were in favor of renewing that 10-cent levy. And I think that's a really important point to emphasize in all of our literature, and certainly in the ballot title itself. This particular, that one is a renewal. It's not something new. So the proposal is for that renewal for 6 years. It generates $144,000, as we've discussed, and an estimate of the median price, or the median value of a home in Washougal right now, is about $275,000, and so annually that would cost $27.50. This additional levy lid lift proposal, the very recent one, also 10 cents, for public safety is $144,000, so it also would cost that median priced home $27.50. Combined, it's 20 cents, so it's just twice that. It's $55 a year for the two.
Is that a 6-year timeline as well?
Yes, both are for 6. Well, both are proposed to be 6. I would offer this. I think we have, because we did a 6-year in the past, I think this council has felt comfortable in terms of being true to the ability to say renewal and using that 6 years again. These expenses don't go away at the end of 6 years.
Renewal and establishment.
Right.
We'd have to call it.
There are some communities that have identified certain services in their communities and have asked for permanent lifts. Some have received them and some have not. It's, you know, it's the choice of the voters in the community what they want to do. So we turn from the lifts to another cornerstone of the mayor's kind of draft high-level budget approach, and that is the creation of a transportation benefit district, which is a mechanism the state has provided for us, and adding the vehicle license fee that the statute provides. The maximum that it provides is $20 without a vote. $20 is councilmanic. Estimates as of a few months ago is that $20 would bring in roughly $215,000. And as we've been mentioning, the mayor's proposal is to phase that in over 2 years. And so it's roughly 107. I used 105 earlier just to keep the numbers round. And so you can see what that would do. It's important to note that the Department of Licensing indicates that from the date of creation and imposition of the fee until you actually begin to see a revenue stream, there's a lag of about 6 months. But for an ongoing budgeting discussion, you could assume these numbers. We're at the stage now, if you enacted it today, which we have no ordinance in front of you today, we really wouldn't get the money until 6 months from now, so we've lost a month of 2015.
Dave?
Is Clark County still considering a vehicle tab fee?
I'm not aware if they are. I haven't seen anything in their agendas.
They have their road fund.
But they can also do this. They do have a road fund, but they also have the ability to do it.
But they can't do it
Plus
over vehicles that are registered within the city of Washougal. If we already have one in place.
If we already have one,
Can't
That
hear
was my
that.
next question.
Right.
We can head that off.
right, we can do one, or they can do one, or we can both do one, we would take first priority here in Washougal. It can never be more than the council, than the statutory limit without a vote anyway. So,
What's the statutory limit, $30?
20,
20?
right?
Without a vote now?
Without a vote.
With a vote?
You can go much higher with a vote.
So it's councilmatic.
Up to 20 is councilmatic.
Up to 20 you can
And
do on your own.
Are these things usually implemented by councils as opposed to votes?
It's been both,
And sales taxes have started taking hold and
That's-
passing
right?
as well. Instead of this, increasing the sales tax for road funds.
Right. The Transportation Benefit District is essentially becomes a separate special purpose government. But for all intent and purpose, it is you as the council. And you can do property tax, you can do sales tax, both voted. You can do fees up to 20 yourselves, or voted higher.
Well,
So,
The 6-month, is that just a lag in the pipeline, or do you actually lose 6 months of revenue?
I think that's Department of Revenue and Department of Licensing saying it's gonna take them upwards of 6 months to get us online and them collecting it through all of their areas and that type of stuff.
So it's just a lag.
I don't know if we get some big lump sum of 6 months worth of money in 6 months. I think the lag has the effect of a delay, essentially.
And from what Jennifer has said so far, it's more of a caution from Department of Licensing that don't expect to get this right away. It could take us up to 6 months. They might get it in 3 months. They
Could
might
come
get it
sooner,
in 4
right.
months. They might get it in 8 months. Come on, Joe?
And just one other thing. I just wanted to observe that Walla Walla went out for a vote on sales tax for a transportation benefit district, and they got it by a very strong percentage. Their situation is quite different than ours because they have a significant amount of sales tax which is generated from people outside of the city limits coming in to shop. So it made sense to use sales tax to support the transportation system inside the city. Washougal has relatively very little sales tax, and almost none of it is generated from people coming to Washougal to shop, a little bit of
of
it.
course, we're changing that.
So each city is in a different situation as to whether it makes sense to do sales tax or license tab fees or how much and so on and so forth. So it's been pretty much all over the map throughout the state.
So he just addressed what I was gonna ask, because sales tax would help us pay for it from people from outside. Could Jen do a projection on what we get on sales tax currently?
We already did.
Yeah, we have that. We could bring it
So
back.
is it-
I don't have it here, but
Yeah,
we-
I don't remember those numbers.
$6,000 more than what the tab fee is?
for how much sales tax is what I don't remember. 0.2, 0.1.
At the 2%, or point.
So you're saying that our
0.02%.
sales tax would bring in approximately 6,000 more?
Almost the exact same number by the time we got done with it.
We can,
We did those numbers during the retreat and gave them to you right there on the spot at the retreat.
we can do what we would do is we've identified the amount of money that we need to raise. And if we assume that that's fixed, then we can back calculate based on the current level of sales tax generation that we have, what we would have to ask the voters for in order to accomplish that. And it was a couple tenths of a cent, I think.
I think that's the maximum we can.
That's the most you can do, and it just ironically happened to be the number, yeah. But I can, even at the break, I can probably find that information.
Dave?
Is that a proposal to bump it another $10 for 2016?
Yes, it's a phase-in. Instead of going right to $20, which is the maximum that the council can do in 2015, the mayor's proposing, I think in part because of some of the feedback here from the council, to phase that in for our community over a 2-year period and do it for $10 for the first year.
So that's a permanent fee then?
It is until it is rescinded,
Okay.
right?
Unless it's rescinded.
Unless it's rescinded, yeah.
County Joe?
Oh, my questions slipped me. Something we brought up the Friday you were meeting here with us. Oh. I'm sorry. Maybe it'll come back.
Okay. Dave, are you finished with your presentation? Because I think you might deal with it and want to give you a chance to deal with it before.
I have just a couple more slides,
Why don't you go ahead
I believe.
if you don't mind,
Okay.
finishing up.
Sure. So, in summary, our projected general fund, street fund deficit's $322,000. The preliminary draft mayor's budget proposal combines expenditure and revenue solutions to balance that budget. We've already enacted the administrative efficiencies. This evening, you have a resolution in front of you for the 10-cent renewal for fire and EMS, and then the $10 fee that we were just discussing. And then there's the possible additional lid lift for enhanced public safety services, and that resolution is in your packet and is before you as well this evening for your action. There were several questions that the council had that I was made aware of. We've talked about the vehicle ER&R slowdown. There was another question about what your prior actions have been over the years with respect to property tax. In 2008, the council at the time took the 1%. In 2009, there was no increase. In 2010, I have conflicting information, and I have to dig in, but I believe it went -1%.
That's correct.
DOR is reporting it differently than that, but maybe they show zeros for anything that's not positive. In 11 and 12 and 13, we were in that strange context where we couldn't really do anything in that regard, but we were banking the capacity, and without getting into a long explanation about all of that and remembering all of that, and we had the expiring lid lift and declining assessed valuation. The bottom line is in 11, 12, and 13, I would say there were zeros, there were no increases, but the fact is we actually lost revenue because of our rate cap. We weren't able to enjoy all of even our new construction. We left some of the new construction on the table, so to speak. However, in 2014, you took the 1% and you took banked capacity over 3 years. And that banked capacity over the 3 years was 0.61%. So about 0.2 per year. So you can see what we left on the table. It's about 0.8 per year for 3 years. So very, very, very modest, and in fact, lower than what your authority is. The staff and the mayor will continue to assert with respect to the property tax that, in our opinion, it's well known that our routine expenses grow at more than 1% per year, just paper, pencils, asphalt, gravel,
Health insurance.
Health insurance grows higher than that. We approved recently modest salary growth in the 1% to 2% range. We're in arbitration with our police guild. We don't know what the arbitrator will say. And about 40% of our revenue comes from the property tax. And so to us, it's very evident that the legislature gave us the ability to do that 1% every year so that at least for 40% of our general fund revenue, we can try to keep pace with that pressure on our expenses. But that's why we have the structural deficit, because even 1% actually doesn't keep up with inflation, just inflationary pressures on everything. And that's the dilemma for general purpose local governments. So that's your history of what you've done with that. There was a question about the Utility Assistance Fund, and I want to make sure I get this right, but I think the gist of the question was, or is, there's roughly $90,000 in that fund. We are not seeing huge asks against that fund on an ongoing basis. It's a couple, $300-400 each time. And it will take a long time at that rate to draw that down. Is that money available in a one-time way, because that's one-time money, somehow to meet any general fund needs? That was the gist of the question. The answer is very short, no. Those funds were from the utility account. They are from late fees. However, late fees have to accrue to the utility account. And the reason that we can use them in the way that we are is twofold. One is the Constitution allows us to do that for the poor and the infirmed, and we've got criteria to make sure that we're doing that. And then the other is the payments are made right back into the utility fund, so they are for the benefit of the utility fund. That's the audit mechanism that makes it legitimate. So that's the explanation, but the shorter answer is no, that funding is not available. If we discontinue the use of those funds, it will go back into just the cash balance of our utility operating fund.
Just a bit on terminology. I don't think of it as leaving it on the table. I think of it as leaving it in the taxpayer's pocket.
Ratepayers'
And
pocket.
Yeah, the ratepayer, right. If we don't use it for the purposes of the program, then we would, it would go back into the cash reserves. It would, I'm not sure what impact it would have. When we set up the fund, we did not change the rates because the millions and millions of dollars that we're talking about in our capital facilities plan, we did not make a 0.1% change in our rates per se to react to the 90,000. And so I don't think we would change it if we put it back. But we could put it back.
Mayor, I have actually 6 points and questions and comments.
Okay.
You council will bear with
You
me.
want him to go through the last one?
I have one.
Oh, you have
just
one.
one more. I'm sorry. Actually, I had one more slide after this. Is just next steps. But there was also a question about how can we be responsive as quickly as possible and potentially in the 2015 budget to some of the feedback from the survey, namely around enhancing communications. And I think the council's hit upon something that we've been talking about as well. I think we want to try to do that. And the answer is we have to try to do that. We have a $322,000 deficit. So for example, if we were to invest $30,000 in enhanced communications, we would have a $352,000 deficit. I do believe that it would be appropriate to cover the costs of communications in part out of the proceeds of the public safety lid lift, because some of our communication will be around public safety, and that would be an enhancement to public safety, and it would be an enhancement to communication. I don't know how that would break out, but I think that's a start, and we'd have to identify some other funds. So we'll work on that.
Do you have any estimate of what enhanced communications will cost?
Well, it depends on what definition you put on it.
Right.
Is that a body? Is it a lot of mailings? Is it greater email systems? Depends on what it is.
I think we need the support of an additional personnel, whether it's through contract or internships or a part-time employee. But I think we need to start delving into social media. I think there are some initial mailings out of the gate, additional mailings, and then just try to leverage the technology. You have to stay on top of those things to keep it relevant and fresh. And I could see it cost, we could keep a person busy, but I just don't know if that's going to be reasonable given this deficit. Maybe a half of a position, so $30,000 or $40,000 potentially.
And even at that, we've got to find it, so.
Right.
Brett, you've got some points.
His last slide.
Very quickly, the next steps are your action this evening regarding both of these lid lifts. At some point, we need to know how to proceed on the license fees. We will be making updated budget estimates. These are all based on Jen's very preliminary estimates, and we'll have continuing discussions with the council. And this is our schedule for the rest of the year, just to give you a feel. It's on us. We're planning to be back on the 25th, potentially in workshop. On the 22nd, we're due statutorily. We have to provide the final draft estimates and hone in on that 322, make sure, it's not 328 or 350. Workshop on the 13th to walk through that some more, and then on the 27th, statutorily, we'll be at the deadline, and that's where the mayor's formal budget proposal will be made. And you will also set hearings for the tax levies and for the budget to be held on November 10th. We have a workshop on the 3rd. Per your rules, there's a town hall, and I've tentatively looked at the 8th for that. So it's in between the mayor proposing his budget, your workshop, and then the hearings on the 10th. So you'd be well informed by the town hall, and the community would have some time to see the budget. You'd have the hearings on the 10th. You would need to adopt ad valorem taxes on that date. And then you can see that leaves a month or so then for the council to ultimately adopt a budget. Any one of those dates, including the 10th, I suppose, you could adopt the budget since that's the hearing day. And as we have in the last several years, we look to cancel that last December meeting. So I threw that in because I know you'd probably be looking to do that.
In fact, we even canceled all of December ones.
We'd have to have one, so we
Oh,
could,
we
by
did
statute,
that.
so we could
That's
cancel
when
the
we had
8th.
4, that's right.
Right. So that's the schedule. Keep that in mind, and this is how that'll move forward. And then I'm done.
Okay, I'll try to get us out of here.
I have one thing.
Wrote down a number of things. Transportation Benefit District, I'd forgotten that the county can, if we don't adopt one, the county could adopt one, and it would take revenue from our residents if we didn't have one.
Right.
If
It's
we,
to be deployed countywide, but there's no specific formula.
right, if we'd adopted a Transportation Benefit District but did not impose a fee, would that keep the county out?
I think it's first to the fee, but I will confirm that for you.
Okay. What did the community survey show on the car tab fee?
We asked about $20, and it was about 65% that said no.
Okay.
Did it say what it would go towards?
Yes, street maintenance. Yep.
Huh?
Interestingly, street maintenance was the highest priority for us as well in the survey.
And it's on our agenda tonight. I'm going to, wait, okay, I'm going to support the fire and EMS levy lid lift. It gives the voters it's replacing a current lift, and it gives the voters a choice.
It's replacing an expired lift.
Right, right. The other question I had is on the public safety. Is the administration recommending that, or is there?
We haven't, no. And for two reasons. One, up to this point, this is the first I've heard of council saying that they're willing to look at additional revenues. Up to this point, everything has been only spend what you bring in. Don't talk about new stuff. On the other side, I also look to department heads to tell us what we need out there. Now, the chief will be the first person to tell you, and I'll be the second person to tell you that, yes, he could use 2 or 3 additional officers. But the question is still, where does the funding come from? There's nobody, I think, around this table that doesn't want to put more money into that side of it. But it's just a question of where it's coming from. All of our department heads have the ability to bang on the table and tell me I'm nuts and that they need to have additional people, and we haven't seen that come out. In the survey, I think it ranked very highly that folks were also very comfortable with where our emergency services, including and specifically police services, were. So, no, this is not coming with a recommendation from the administration. If you all want to put it on there and the folks want to give it to us, I'm certainly not going to object.
Well, I'm not inclined to support it at this time, at least. But one of the things I wonder about, and you look at the public not supporting the tab fee, what about doing a levy lid lift for streets instead of public safety?
It is an option for a TBD to use property tax.
Property taxes.
Or could we just use general fund money if we just did a levy lid lift and a companion levy lid lift? Well, I'm not even sure we need it this year. Let me get to my final comment. I think the idea of slowing the depreciation schedule is a great one on the equipment and vehicle replacement. I know I used to listen to Dino Rossi all the time talk about his days as chair of the Ways and Means Committee in the State Senate, and that was one of the key ways they balanced their budget in 2002. And I think that would be, or 2003, I think it was. So I think fully supportive of that, and that, at least for 2015, takes care of the problem, doesn't it? If you do that, along with a...
If the voters pass the fire and EMS with the other administrative efficiency that we've already introduced, that balance is 322.
So I would be, I think that's where I'd like to go, and I would entertain a levy lid lift or some kind of vote on streets in 2015.
Joe?
We had talked about asking the voters about the roads with a tab fee. And then we find out from the survey they're not interested. But if we were going to go to the voters, this isn't tonight a deadline? So we have to pass something
If we're going to
for
go...
the ballot?
If we're going to go this year,
Or we could have a special meeting to...
So
or a special meeting.
this is something, I mean, if we really believe that the roads need to be fixed. Did you just say, Brent, that you feel like it could wait a year?
I think we've found solutions to make 2015 work, and we can go back to the voters in 2015 and ask them for,
Well, we wouldn't
there
have
are
the
many
levy
options.
lid lifts.
A levy lid lift, we could do the TBD property tax, we could also do tab fees up to a little above $20, and that would be a vote as well. So there's a lot of options, and I don't think we're ready to go tonight, or maybe probably not even in a week, to do that. So
If you wanted something on the ballot in November, I think ideally a special meeting next week would give the team adequate time to really craft something really good. I could probably craft something, because there are examples out there, craft something at the break and into the meeting tonight, but I don't think it would be as quality as if we had a week.
So you're saying with all of the savings, with the levy lid lifts, we could do improvements this year on streets also?
No.
Or we
you're not
would
doing-
postpone?
You're not doing any improvements.
You're saying postpone improvements?
we could fund what what the council's directed.
360,000.
Right, and that is an improvement of 210,000 over what we've been doing. We've been doing 150. Now, in 14, we did get a one-time enhancement to that, partly because the auditor isn't coming every year. We put it into streets, just a little bit more, but that was one time.
So we do partial.
Joyce?
I want to speak towards the levy lift for public safety. I think taking it to the people for a vote is a very fair way to have them address whether they want to put more police and enhanced safety in our community. We're talking about annexing, there are other issues coming forward, and we're short now. I think it's very important that we find a way to do this, and it seems to me to let people vote on it is a way to do that. And then they're responsible for their community. But if we don't give them the opportunity to vote on it, they'll never be able to say whether they want or don't want that.
I'm inclined the same way, and Brent, just so you know, this came out of the Budget Committee discussions. This is a council initiative, and the reason for it is primarily, as I understand it, because we're concerned about the current workload on the police and how it affects their staffing on the streets, and the difficulty of backing each other up under the current staffing levels. Our concern is that we're wearing out our police force pretty rapidly. This is not a good situation. I've seen situations where tired people make bad decisions. We've already endured that.
I'm tired right now.
And we've already endured that recently, so this is, I think, where it came from. And I'm inclined to support it primarily because it goes to the people for the decision. And I'm comfortable with their making the choice that is best for them.
Well, if I could respond. Our survey showed that the people are more concerned about streets than,
Because they don't know the burden on the police force.
well, our survey showed what it showed, and I am concerned about, yeah, I'd like to fund the police back up to the 20 officer level, but I'm concerned that if we go to the well too often, that we're going to have problems getting them to approve something. I think it might be a higher priority for our citizens, which would be the streets, and so I'm not inclined to support the public safety levy lift at this time.
Well, it's interesting, because if you put it both to them, they have a chance to make a choice.
We're only putting one to them tonight.
Well, unless
Well,
we
you know, is
have a
it
special
possible
meeting.
to put the decision on the streets
So we'd have three.
tab to the voters?
Well, it's their choice then.
You have,
I wouldn't.
I don't want to say unlimited options, but you can ask the voters any number of different things. We're just up against a deadline.
It might, yeah, doing three might jeopardize
All three.
all three. And the one we need one at least, and I actually, you know, from a likelihood of getting them passed, I don't think I would jeopardize the one.
Well, if we're gonna do the streets ourselves, that jeopardizes the other two, under the logic that you just
Well,
advanced.
I'm not advocating going at the same time for them. I just said, let's go with one thing this year and revisit the issue next year as far as, you know, public safety as well, but I wouldn't do them all at once.
Joyce?
Well, I like the transportation benefit district where the council makes a choice. We can do it at a $5 or $10 fee if you want to. I would go for the whole $20, but bring it in. That can be a council decision, and it isn't on the ballot, and we know our streets will be funded. There will be no question about whether the streets are funded or not. That takes care of that, and then it leaves the voters the two, the EMS and safety, which are a compatible element in our society of our public safety.
So if
To me, it's not a difficult decision.
Nor me.
Paul?
I'm sorry.
When Jennifer McDaniel got in touch with you, did she indicate she was going to be available electronically for tonight's meeting? She's
Not at
She
all.
said she would be completely unavailable, unfortunately.
okay. Well, as chair of that committee, I feel I should report. I don't want to put words in her mouth, but she was a strong supporter of the idea of finding a way to fund an additional police officer. And when the idea of going out for a levy lid lift to do it, she was strongly supportive of that and thought it was a great idea. And so I just wanted to report that in her absence.
Other questions, comments?
So the $20, just to reiterate that again, would not need to be put to ballot. That's something we could decide
Up to $20.
up to $20.
For the license fee.
So really, they're only gonna see if you did both the lid lifts, the two lid lifts.
That's all that would be on the ballot, correct? I think they'd
Well,
be
except
aware of
that-
our decision, or your decision on the license tab.
Except that we had always, some of us had believed that it should go to the voters, for the vehicle tab.
And we have a survey that says 2/3 are against it. So,
And that would include, then you wouldn't have the slowdown. You'd continue at the normal maintenance schedule, pretty much.
Well,
We may still look at that as well.
Yeah,
or maybe do less of it.
yeah.
There's something to be said for having things that are hard and fast and we're following a schedule and we're not deviating from that. Previously, and it's a little bit of a bad example because the city never had an ER&R fund. We got to the point where we're keeping police cars for 10 years and running the wheels off of them. You know, backhoes that are costing us more to repair every year than we're getting out of them or a new one would cost. So you get into that rut a little bit, and once you start deviating from that, when do you stop deviating? You've got to be very smart in how you do that. So it probably wouldn't be one of the first recommendations, but there may be some things, and I see them on an annual basis as well. Really? Why did we replace that one? We only use it for this, that, or the other thing. Well, the schedule said that. Okay, well, maybe we should look at some of these individually as well. So there could be still be some things we could do. Dave?
If we councilmanically approve the tab fee, does that mean we get 360 on streets plus the tab fee revenues?
You'd have to sort out where the discussions are at this point. Our original discussion and the original recommendation from the administration was that the tab fee helped us get to 360 and balance the budget.
Right. We would use.
At $10 per vehicle, not 20.
That's the recommendation. Now, the council could do otherwise. If you decided to have the tab fee 105 for $10 or 210 for $20 be on top of the 360, then we would still have, you know, a gap of $110,000 to find for deficit reduction. We would go to that ER&R strategy.
Paul?
ER&R at this point, we're using basically a national manual for best practices, correct?
I believe so.
My observation is that that national manual is an average. So for example, if you have a pickup truck or a dump truck in Keene, New Hampshire, where you spread literally tons of salt on the road every year and it corrodes everything that you drive, the lifetime of that vehicle is significantly less than it would be here where we don't do that. And so that drives the average lifetime down.
We would have to get, not to interrupt you, Paul, but to interrupt you, we would have to get information from Paul Lewis on that, though. We paid him not an insignificant amount of money to take all of that and to develop our schedule. That tells me he didn't just take something off of a shelf and say, this is what you should do.
So in any case, that manual, you start there, but then you can base things on experience. Part of our experience is that we have a magician by the name of Frank Ernst over at the 14Workshop, and you know, it may be that we turn the wheels off a few things earlier, but other things later. So I would just say that, yeah, the ER fund that we're using at the moment is kind of a, by guess and by golly, a pretty good one because it's best practices. But experience should inform that.
And I believe it already has.
Yeah, and that's what.
It's not a by gosh and by guess or anything close to that. So.
And we're refining it, I think, as part of this.
One thing I want to make sure before we break and remind council, I certainly hear the discussions and the concerns in regard to the car tab fee. I hear the comments about going to the public for a vote on it. In the end, we already know that folks are interested and concerned about the condition of the streets. We're interested and concerned about the condition of the streets. Whether it gets, if it gets voted no, you still have the same question in front of you. How do you fund the repairs? They don't go away. In emergency services, levy lid lift does nothing for streets. EMS does nothing for streets.
The public also said they didn't want to fund it.
Gee, that's no surprise to anybody.
Yeah.
I don't think, you know, there are very few instances where you're going to see people say, yes, please tax me more.
Well,
Please tax me more.
I'm really pointing out that the survey is a double-edged sword.
Oh, we knew that going in. We knew that on everything. I think the only one that we felt even comfortable on in there and that we would know what the answer would come out to be, just not how large, is on EMS. And the reason we know that is because we have 34 years, 36 years of experience with that, of them very strongly saying yes. So, with that, we are adjourned for this meeting. We'll be back here at 7 o'clock.